When we realize how much we enjoy the quilting community, we often want to take it up a notch by getting more involved with the pattern designers. And one way that you can do this is by becoming a pattern tester. My next guest, Kendall McCallum, has done just that. And she is generously sharing all sorts of tips for why, how, and when you should be a tester. So grab your sewing and a beverage of your choice. And here is my interview with Kendall McCallum. Welcome, Kendall.
Karen.
Thank you for being on the show. Whereabouts in the world are you coming to us from?
I live in Barrie, Ontario, which is about an hour and 15 minutes north of Toronto.
And are you originally from Barrie?
I'm not. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised there. So was my husband. We immigrated to Canada in December of 2019, and we've ended up in Barrie and loved it ever since.
Did you come for a job or just a change?
Just a change. We had been looking for a place to move. Quite honestly, California was just getting too expensive. We loved it there. That's where our families are. But we couldn't live the life we wanted. So we looked at other states. There wasn't another state that made a whole lot of sense. And so we figured, let's look north. So we looked at Canada. Originally, Ottawa was our plan. My husband had an interview with a company based out there. They flew us out. They did the whole thing. That job ended up not working out. And then we ended up in Toronto. Then when everything went remote, we came up to Barrie. I still wanted to be somewhere a little bit smaller. I'm from a huge city, and then Toronto is another huge city. And over the years, I've learned I do better in a smaller pond. So I was on my quest for a smaller pond, and we looked at a few cities in the outside of the GTA. We've really just sort of fell in love with Barrie. I can walk to a lake from my house, which feels really special.
Yes, and you're that much closer to all the ski communities, all the cottage country, all the canoe trails and everything.
Yeah, I can get to really interesting, outdoor activities pretty quickly. I like Barrie because it gets rural pretty quickly. You can go 10 minutes out of town and you've got farms and tons of land, and there's a lot of really beautiful geography up here. And and the lake is really fun in the summer. In the summertime, they put one of those giant inflatable obstacle courses on the lake, and you can spend $15 for a ticket and go run on those, on the lake inflatable. And it's really neat. That I like the cycles and I like the seasons, and I really appreciate being able to have the downtime in winter and then the rev up in the spring and summer. That resonates with me. I really like that part.
So were you a quilter before you came to Canada?
Yes, I've been a quilter basically my whole life. When I was a kid, my mom got me sewing lessons, and for the longest time, all I made was pillowcases. And I remember my sewing instructor basically saying, "Kendall, we got to make something, but it cannot be a pillowcase." I think I liked that I could just finish it and get it done. Then it turned into quilting. My grandmothers were quilters, but I didn't really inherit that from them. It wasn't. I mean, I inherited it probably genetically, but it wasn't like a craft that was passed down to me. But it was kind of always in the family. My great-grandmother, my mom's grandmother, was a quilter, and that she was very poor and lived in Oklahoma and Arizona. And quilting is quite literally how she supported her family through the Depression. She did not have a floor. So when you say like she was dirt poor, she was dirt poor. She did not have a floor. She had dirt. And so she had a consignment agreement with a local gas station, and she would basically consign her quilts in the local gas station, and that money would go to support her family. That story kind of always existed in the family ethos. I picked it up when I, 12 or 13, and then I sewed for a long time. And then when I went to university, I didn't bring a machine with me. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to sew in a dorm. So I kind of put sewing down for a bit, and then I picked it back up in my early 20s and really kicked off, got really, really into quilting probably around 2012. And then it cranked up a notch, I'd say, in the last 4 or 5 years.
Now, I met you at QuiltCon. Was QuiltCon Atlanta your first QuiltCon?
It wasn't. I went to, I think it was 2018, and it was the last one in Pasadena. I was living in LA at the time still, and there is a shop it was in Montrose at the time, and I think they've moved to La Crescenta, called Quilt and Things Fiber Arts. and they're lovely. They're such a great shop. But was walking by, going to have lunch with somebody, and I was like, "Oh, quilt shop, let's pop in. Can't say no to fabric." And I got chatting with them, and they were harried. And she was like, "Sorry, we're so stressed. We're getting ready for QuiltCon," and I had spaced on it, and I was like, "Oh, when is that?" She's like, "It's this weekend." um, so I went online and I bought myself a ticket, and I drove out to Pasadena and I went to QuiltCon. But I really just did a day, but it was really impactful for me because it was the thing that really hit home for me that this was more than, I don't want to say craft, because I feel like we use the word craft to sometimes diminish something. And I don't mean it in that way. It's what really drove home that this was art, and that this technique and this skill could be used for art and for protest and for so many important things that weren't just reusing fabric and keeping you warm. Reusing fabric and keeping you warm is super important, but seeing the art side of it really it flipped something in my brain. And then I'd say my first real QuiltCon experience was in Phoenix last year. That's when I took classes and did the whole thing.
So did you take any classes or lectures at Atlanta?
No, I didn't. In Phoenix, I overbooked myself. So Atlanta, I went the other end and I underbooked myself. So I didn't, I just did a lot of exploring and meeting. I spent a good amount of time with Amanda from the Canadian Modern Quilt Collective. And she and I did some networking and met a lot of people. And that was mostly this year's QuiltCon experience.
So what is your favorite part of quilting?
I specialize in foundation paper piecing. I love teensy, obnoxious, minute details. I love when I'm sewing, say, the eye of a cat, and I love when I have to only do like 4 stitches, because I really have to focus on it, and I really have to pay attention, and I have to really like focus for those little bits. One of my very best friends in the whole world has probably the best fine motor skills on this planet. And I always thought my fine motor skills were bad because hers are so good. So whenever we would do art projects together, I would be in charge of the bigger things, the bigger picture, and she would be in charge of the smaller things. And I was always a little bit envious of that. And so when I get into the minutia of a super fine detailed foundation paper piece pattern, I find a lot of satisfaction in that. So I can, get those little details. What I've learned over the years is my fine motor skills are actually pretty good. I just can't compare myself to her because hers are superhuman, and that's not fair to anybody.
Isn't that funny about skills, that you don't realize what you're good at until years later, because it's easy for you. You just presume everyone can do it.
Yeah.
Or as you say, you're standing beside someone who is at, in the top percent of the top percent, and therefore you don't think you're good enough, where you're perfectly, you're actually above the norm. You just don't know it.
Well, and the one good thing about that is that since I thought my fine motor skills were poor, I went on a mission to make them better. And so I took English paper piecing classes. I bought embroidery kits. I bought all of these things to practice that skill. And then I get in it and I'm like, well, I'm actually kind of good at this. Maybe I'm not terrible. But the perfectionism creeps in, and the comparison to somebody who's really good at something creeps in. And it really drives home the whole idea of comparison is the thief of joy. So I'm trying to not worry about comparing my skills. I want to more be inspired by somebody and their work, and I don't want somebody else's work to make me doubt myself.
Since you've been doing it a long time, but do you know of a beginner mistake that you made?
So was 2011 or 2012, my sister-in-law announced she was pregnant with her first child. And so of course somebody's pregnant and you have to make a quilt. Like that's what you do. And I hadn't been back into quilting mode for a very long time. And I made the mistake of jumping into a quilt entirely made out of circles. And it really changed my trajectory. But it was I think it was Crazy Quilt Mom, and she sunsetted her blog in 2019, but it was a pattern that was just made out of, each circle was, it was a quarter circle, and they were all same background, but slightly different, quarters of the circle. And I didn't have templates. I used probably paper templates and maybe a bowl. And that was a mistake. The whole quilt, and biting that much off was a huge mistake. The benefit of that, though, is I had such a pain cutting that quilt that I was like, I never want to cut an accurate cutting thing ever again. And that's how I found foundation paper piecing, because you don't have to pre-cut. You can just kind of whack at your fabric, put it on, and then trim off the excess. I've gotten a lot better about waste and being efficient in the intervening years, but that was a mistake. Just picking up something that was several levels above my skill level. But that's how I learned. So I am a jump in with 2 feet kind of gal, and that's what I did.
Or liking to skip the unnecessary steps.
Yes. Who needs an actual template when you can just kind of print something and hope it works?
Or instructions?
Yeah,
instructions.
We'll just figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I'm that type of person too. So you've said that you like to make foundation paper piecing, but within foundation paper piecing, there are a lot of different styles. What kinds do you like to make?
I like bold and impactful things. I'm not a subtle person. I like a lot of color. So I like pieces that are just pretty impactful. When I really started, I honed, I think, my ability. There's a website called Fandom in Stitches, and they're really cool. And they have a ton of free patterns that are made for, your various fandoms. And so I'd go in and I'd pick something that sort of resonated, and I would practice on that. I'll make anything at the end of the day. I like to make stuff. As long as it's a decently written pattern, I'm happy to make it. I don't have I don't know that I have a specific preference. I like plants a lot, and I like art. So I've been making, I tested David, which was by Legit Kits, which is a quilt of Michelangelo's David. I recently tested the girl with the pearl earrings, and I'm actually going to I'm working on a more detailed version of that as a test. So I do enjoy replicas of art in quilts. With things like David, I really like how that is such a hard, obviously it's hard, it's marble, but the piece is made out of marble, but I like the transition of that into something really, really soft. And what I like about it, additionally, is that you still kind of have the edge. The way it's drafted still feels like it's still got hard angles, and it still feels a little bit hard. But it's a quilt, you can snuggle up with it if you want. You can, it can be draped, whereas actual David can't.
How did you move into pattern testing?
So one thing about me is I really like to have a deadline. And so when all of my friends started getting pregnant, that worked really well as a deadline. Like a birth date is a deadline. So I could make pieces for my friends and get them out. And that's something that really appealed to me in pattern testing. In addition to getting a cool pattern that nobody else has had a chance to sew yet, I'm doing something for somebody else. There is a due date. And the way I found it was I kind of had it in my head that I wanted to start testing patterns, and I was looking, and I found a hashtag on Instagram. I think it was Pattern Testers Wanted or something like that. And the artist her name's Julie. Her business is Hobby Landing, and she's a series called Floral Big Cat. And she needed a tester for her panther. And I sent her a message to say I was interested. And she said, I'm really sorry, I've got enough people. Thanks for asking. And I said, okay, no big deal. And then about a week and a half later, I got a message from her saying, one of my testers has dropped out. Do you have the capacity to do this in this time frame? And I said, sure, send it over and I'll do it. And I tested that and I got it done. I'm pretty quick. When I get into the zone in a foundation paper piece pattern, I am very speedy. And so I cranked it out and I got it back to her. And I think I've tested all of her subsequent pattern releases. And so that's how it started. Once I realized I liked it, I just started looking for other designers who were looking for testers. There were some that I just emailed out of the blue and said, if you ever need somebody, here I am. Some pattern designers have on their website where you can sign up to be a tester. So I'll just go in and I'll put my information in and go from there. But usually it's an Instagram hashtag, and then I just send somebody a message and then they email it to me. Right before QuiltCon, I got a message from the nerdy quilter, and she needed tests. And so she's like, pick what you want. She had categories, so pick a category. And so I clicked one, and I ended up testing 4 marijuana themed quilt blocks, which were interesting. I made like Barbie's dream pipe, is what it ended up looking like. But what I would, if somebody wants to test, basically you just find the designer and sign up, find somebody you like, and test with legit kits. I found them that I started testing with them also through an Instagram hashtag. And now I'm on their email list. So if they've got an upcoming release, they'll send an email out and say, you know, you're on the list of people who have tested for us before and we've liked your work. Here's our upcoming pattern. Let us know if you want to test it.
So did you have to prove that you had the skill, or did they just take whatever you made?
So what a lot of designers do is they try to get people of various skill levels, because a lot of times they're trying to make sure that this will work for somebody who's been doing it forever, and also for somebody who's pretty new to foundation paper piecing. You know, the designer is really interested in making sure there's a broad range of individuals who can make it. With a lot of them, they will ask for your Instagram handles, or how, you know, your socials, and I think they'll go and they'll check and they'll see what you can do. But you can indicate your experience level. Legit kits, they have like a Google form that you fill out and you put in your name and all of that stuff, and then they get back to you. A lot of designers will pick a broad spectrum of testers, because they do really want to make sure it works for as many people as possible.
So do they provide the fabric and the pattern?
They provide the pattern. I've only tested one pattern where I was provided the fabric. The downside to pattern testing is it doesn't make any money. So usually what happens is the designer will, once they've chosen you, they'll email you the PDF, you print it out, you make the pattern, and you get back to them with your feedback. Legit Kits charges you to test. So their patterns are on the pricier side in terms of what foundation paper piece patterns look like. Their patterns are a little on the pricier side. So when you test, you pay a small fee to test. With them, because I'm in Canada and they're based in the States, they don't ship me the fabric. I go and I get my own, usually from Mad About Patchwork, because they have all the Kona. Everybody else is free. They will just send you the pattern and you give them the your notes after. And then I tested something for Carolina Moore, and it was a 60 by 80 bouquet of flowers in a vase. They did send me the fabric for. So I've usually you just get the pattern and you've got to fill in the rest yourself.
So what is the upside for you? What is the, like you say, you don't get compensated in money. What do you get from it?
That's a great question. One, I have a project to work on that has a deadline, and there's somebody it is owed to. And I like having that sort of in my sewing practice. Also, though, I have met so many people through this. So a lot of times what will happen is when you're doing it, when you're testing a pattern, they'll create a chat group. So it's usually on Instagram. Sometimes it'll be on Facebook. It's a group conversation. You can go in and you can chat and you can talk about things, or I'm having a weird problem attaching these two pieces. What do I do? So you get to meet a lot of really interesting people. And that's been really fun. You know, I've always been a little bit younger than my quilting peers. That's less as I get older. But I get to meet a lot, and I never really had very many quilty friends. So through pattern testing, I've met a ton of people. I've made a lot of quilting friends. I've gotten to make some cool stuff that I wouldn't have made otherwise. I just, you know, there are so many things out there to choose from that just having somebody say, hey, you want to do this one, kind of helps cut out all of the noise and gives you a project. But I'd say it's honestly helped me feel like I belong in the quilting world. I've gotten a lot of really interesting exposure from it. I'll post about, you know, what I've done and what I've worked on. And it's just kind of, you know, you're feeding the algorithm, which also helps, you know, because then you're getting that back to you. But I really think it's just meeting people and making things I wouldn't have normally made. With the bouquet of flowers I did for Carolina Moore, they needed a US based tester. And I was the first asked, I said, okay, well, who do you know who is based in the US? And I was like, I don't really know anybody personally. Like, I've never met anybody. But I went back through all of my Instagram chats and I said, Susan, I've tested 4 patterns with Susan. I'm pretty sure, and I know what she can do because we tested the same stuff. So I sent her a message and I said, hey, Susan, I've got this coming up. This is what it looks like. It's a quick turnaround. Can you do it? And she said yes. And I feel way closer to Susan now. We went through this test together and it worked out really well. So I think that's probably what I got out of it. I am, however, at the point where I need to be way more picky about what I'm taking. I think for newer quilters, pattern testing is a really good way to build community. As I've become more established and as I've sort of become a go-to for a couple people, I have to start pruning what I can and can't take. And that's also been interesting to see my growth and to be able to say, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I think that spurred because I tested a pattern that had a lot of lines that weren't straight. And you need straight lines in this technique. Because I've been doing it for, 14 years at this point, I'm able to tweak and maneuver and figure it out. But after that quilt taught me a lesson because I realized I should have read it over first, really reviewed it, and then sent it back and said, fix X, Y, and Z, and then I'll sew it. So it's been interesting to see my growth too.
If somebody else was wanting to get into this, what are some rules that you would advise setting so that you're not taken advantage of?
It's a great question. So first, figure out what your own limits are. Figure out what you are and aren't okay with. I am somebody who really hates when an artist is asked to do something for exposure, but I understand that's part of the gig. Pattern testing is oftentimes something you do for exposure. So, one, make sure that's something you're okay with, because if you're not okay with it, don't do it. Aside from exposure, all you're probably going to get out of it is a free pattern. And probably you've got to meet some people. But in terms of tangible stuff, you have to make sure you're okay with the exposure. You have to make sure you're okay with just getting the pattern. So make sure you like what you're about to test. Make sure you like the artist's work. Make sure you like the technique. I've tested some traditionally pieced things, and that's just not my thing. I've made really cool patterns, and I don't regret them. But I've learned that I don't really want to test a traditionally pieced quilt. I want to test foundation pieced. So make sure you're okay with the trade-off. And if you don't like it, it's okay to say no. It's okay to not test a pattern. I got a message the other day and from an old group that I had tested in before saying, hey, I've got something else coming out. Do you want to do it? I said, no, don't do it. It's fine. Another
and
thing
they still like you.
Yeah, they still like me.
And they still like you.
Okay. Yeah, I still have friends. It's fine. And everybody understands, once you're in it, it can be so scary. Like, oh no, I'm going to say no and they're never going to ask again. That's not, nobody can remember when you said no, unless you were a mega jerk about it. No one's going to have a problem with you politely declining. So yeah, I think that's important, is knowing what your limits are, making sure you're okay with the whole thing, and just having reasonable expectations. Another thing to think about is, what fabric choices does the designer expect? I'm going to use Legit Kits as an example. So because of the way they work, is if you bought a whole kit with them, they send you all the fabric you need. I source my own fabric for it. So I go with the Kona solids. There's another tester who, she does it all in batiks, and they're really neat. I personally don't want to spend that time color matching. So I'm just going to order what's on the fabric sheet. But make sure that you're okay with it. So if I wasn't okay spending the money to buy all of that Kona, I'd probably want to shift to testing something that I can do from my stash. So when I test for floral big cats for hobby landing, 90% of those are from my stash. So if you just make sure you understand what the designer's vision is, I'd say most of the time, they just want you to sew things in the order that they've told you to sew things in to make sure it works. So I think that's important too. It's just kind of knowing what you're getting yourself into before you do it. I think is important.
So how many pattern designers do you work with?
I think I probably have 3 that I work with pretty regularly. But I've worked with a lot. I think I've probably worked with maybe 10 or so, but I most frequently work with Hobby Landing, and Legit Kits are my big ones. And then there's an artist called Fiber Artisan Theo, and I've tested a few things for Theo. This one on the wall is by Full Bobbin Designs. It was a test. And it's a rubber tree. And I actually entered this one into the fair last year, and I won second place at the fair with it. I was very proud of myself. So I'm officially an award-winning quilter.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, you do all this paper piecing. What is your favorite tool for paper piecing?
The seam roller. The seam roller is without a doubt my most used tool. I bought a new one at QuiltCon, and I posted about it on Instagram. You could see the difference between my old one and my new one. I had completely worn out the circle where the peg goes in. I was rolling before QuiltCon, and I was like, this is weird and my shoulder hurts. And my husband's like, you need a new tool, because instead of rolling, it was clunking because it wasn't round anymore. So I've worn the metal away in my seam roller. I also like water pens. When it comes to taking paper out, sometimes it can just get a little bit tough. So using a water pen to wet the seam can make a really big difference. And then everybody needs a pair of tweezers for the teeny, obnoxious bits that won't come out. I
found Laura from Pre-Quilt came to use my long arm, and she had done a paper piece pattern, and I found that this plastic stiletto that she had was the perfect tool to remove paper piecing. It because it's plastic, it doesn't puncture the fabric.
Yeah. And
it has a silicone tip on the other end to help get out those little tiny bits that you would normally use.
Yep.
What do you call it? Tweezers for. So, yeah.
There's also these types of seam rippers that have the like rubber on the end. This is useful too for getting those, the bits of thread as well as paper that just kind of, sometimes you just can't get traction to get them out. So rubbing it with one of the, rubbery end of your seam ripper can be helpful too.
I consider you part of my QuiltCon haul because I have a secondary business called Maker Manager, doing virtual assistant help for makers like myself. Tell me a little bit about that.
I've been an assistant or an admin since about 2014. Before that, I was a teacher. So I have a lot of experience in keeping stuff running. And about a year and a half ago, I decided I wanted to focus my future on art. And so the way that I've been able to find a really solid midpoint is through Maker Manager. And Maker Manager is virtual assistance for creatives. So I can handle your guild contracts. I can keep your projects on track. I can, help get through the dumb stuff that you don't want to do. And it's really neat because I'm doing something that comes pretty naturally to me, but I have gotten to meet so many cool people that it's been really good. I introduced Maker Manager at QuiltCon last year, so 2021. And then I got one client and I've been working with her for about a year and change. And then I've started amping it up in the last 6 or so months. And then I met you at QuiltCon, and I've got another woman who I think I'm going to start working with in a couple of weeks. So my goal ultimately is to get enough of my Maker Manager clients to still be able to support my art. And I think being able to do them both is going to work really well for me.
Do you ever get into experimenting with other types of fabrics then, or other colorways, or you just go from the pattern?
So I have tested with other, or not tested, I've made with other types of materials. I made something for my friend. She used to live in Brooklyn, and I went to visit her. And as part of the Brooklyn experience, I made her take me to Mood, because if you're in New York City and you're a stitcher, you want to go to Mood Fabrics and meet Swatch and see like all of this cool stuff. And when I was there, I bought a scrap of gold leather, which I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I knew I needed it. And so I ended up making her a mini quilt to say thank you. I ended up putting it in an embroidery hoop, but I used the gold leather in that piece. So I'll play around and I'll see what works. I would not do leather again, I don't think. But it was neat. I'm glad I did it. I don't think I would repeat that experiment. But I pretty typically stick with cotton. I have an embarrassing stash. It's huge. So I need to work through all of that cotton before I really get into anything else.
So do you put a label on these quilts?
When I finish them, I just have a lot of tops laying around. I love the piecing. It's a big fabric puzzle to me, but I have to make the puzzle pieces. So I have a lot of tops. When I do finish something, I try to remember to label it, but I will say I have a ton of older pieces that aren't labeled. I don't think I thought it was worthy of a label, if I'm being honest.
Well, that's a beginner mistake. I hate to say that. You just think that, oh, I'm not a master quilter, so I should not be labeling it. This quilt doesn't need to have a legacy, but the truth is it does.
Yes, it does. And so I have started labeling things in the last, 5 or so years, but there are absolutely some pieces out there that don't have labels, but I'm better about it. I sent some minis out, and even if it's just making a quick label with like Eaton Bond to put something on it, I try to label them all now.
So if people want to contact you, how do they get a hold of you?
The best way to get in touch with me is probably through Instagram or email. My Instagram handle is simcoestitchcraft. Simcoe is the region that I live in. And then Stitchcraft sounds like witchcraft, and that works for me. I can also be at email at simcoestitchcraft@gmail.com, or if for Maker Manager stuff at hello@makermanager.ca.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. You have shared an awful lot of valuable information, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Karen.
I hope that you've enjoyed my interview with Kendall McCallum. As you heard in the interview, she is beginning to help me behind the scenes, so you'll probably hear her name a lot in the future. My break from Karen's Quilt Circle has been a little bit longer than anticipated, but I have a ton of amazing guests lined up for the rest of the year, so be sure to subscribe. And now you can also listen to this series as a podcast on YouTube Music. So next time you're in your sewing room, be sure to have Karen's Quilt Circle playing on your phone or iPad. I have interviewed so many amazing and interesting people on this series. Let one inspire you. And check out my last week's video on the making of maple and eucalyptus. Take care, and I'll see you next time.